Let's talk about Guanajuato, Mexico. It's this incredible city, just full of winding alleys and stunning colonial colors. But one of its most famous spots, the Callejón del Beso, or the Alley of the Kiss, holds a story that's way more interesting than your typical travel photo. We're going to dive into the legend, the pretty surprising reality, and find the true soul of this amazing city.
Okay, so let's just jump right to the end of the story. To this one single tragic moment, this quote. It's the climax of a story that has pulled millions of people to this tiny little alleyway in the middle of Mexico. It's a tale of forbidden love, of absolute rage, and one last impossible kiss. So let's set the scene. We're standing in the Callejón del Beso, and this alley is so narrow, I'm talking just 68 centimeters wide, that the balconies on each side practically touch. And it's right here that the city's most famous and most tragic love story supposedly took place. So here's how the classic tale goes. You've got Carmen, who's the daughter of this really wealthy, super controlling guy. And then there's Luis, a humble miner with not much to his name. Her father, of course, forbids the romance. So Luis, in this amazing stroke of genius, actually buys the house directly across the alley. Their balconies become their secret spot. But one night, her father catches them, and in a total fit of rage, he grabs a dagger and stabs his own daughter. As she's dying, all Luis can do is reach across that tiny gap, hold her hand, and give it one final kiss. But here's the thing. This legend, it's not just some old story. It's a full-on living ritual. Thousands of couples make a pilgrimage to this alley just to stand on the third step. It's painted bright red, you can't miss it, and share a kiss. The promise? 7 years of happiness. But there's a warning, too. If you skip the kiss, you're looking at 7 years of bad luck. It's the perfect mix of old folklore and modern tourism, right? Okay, so we have this powerful, romantic, and super tragic story that basically defines Guanajuato for so many people. But this is where our whole story takes a really sharp turn. We've got to look past the legend and start asking some tougher questions about where it actually came from.
We've just been deep in their tragic love affair. It feels so real. But what if the entire story is built on a foundation of, well, nothing? It's time to ask the really big question.
And there it is. The simple, kind of shocking answer. Despite all the passion and all the little details of the legend, there is absolutely zero historical evidence that Carmen or Luis ever lived, or loved, or died in this alley. Not one single piece of paper, nothing. So if it's not history, what is it? Well, the story most likely popped up in the late 19th century. It fits perfectly with all those dramatic, tragic romance novels that were popular in Europe back then. Then, the legend got this huge boost in 1988 when Guanajuato became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Suddenly, you've got a flood of new tourists, and the city needed some great stories to tell. The Legend of the Kiss, it was the perfect story at the perfect time. So, the legend might be a fabrication, but that doesn't mean Guanajuato doesn't have authentic traditions. Actually, one of its most vibrant, most genuine cultural experiences is deeply connected to that very same alley. So instead of a myth, let's talk about the city's living soundtrack, the Callejonadas.
Okay, so what is a callejonada? Honestly, it's kind of like a walking serenade or roving street party. You start out at the beautiful Templo de San Diego, where you meet up with an estudiana. That's a musical group of university students all dressed up in these traditional costumes. Then you just follow them as they wind through the alleys, playing music, telling local stories, and getting everybody to dance. And guess where it all ends? Yep, right at the Callejón del Beso, for a super dramatic retelling of the very legend we just found out isn't true.
And this tradition is incredibly easy to jump into. For about $8, you get this 90-minute immersive cultural tour. And yeah, the stories are mostly in Spanish, but the music, the energy, that stuff doesn't need any translation at all. It's also worth remembering that a lot of these performers are students, so tossing them a small tip at the end is a really nice way to show you had a great time.
These nightly callejonadas are like the city's intimate heartbeat, a tradition you can join any night of the year. But once a year, that quiet heartbeat turns into an absolute roar. Guanajuato hosts an event that puts it on the global cultural map. And with that kind of fame comes some pretty complex challenges for a small colonial city. The Festival Internacional Servantino is a cultural behemoth. It is, and this is not an exaggeration, the biggest cultural event in all of Latin America.
For a few weeks every October, this city of just 200,000 people just swells as it welcomes thousands of artists performing literally everything from opera and classical music to wild experimental theater. But this massive wave of people creates a serious dilemma, you know? It's one that historic cities all over the world are dealing with. The festival brings in money and prestige for sure, but it also brings over-tourism and can push prices up for locals. So the big question for Guanajuato is, how do you host the entire world without losing your authentic character in the process?
So how do you choose between these two experiences? Well, the Servantino Festival is unbelievable for serious culture lovers, but it's expensive, it's insanely crowded, and you have to plan months in advance. The Callejonadas, on the other hand, are happening every single night, they're super affordable, you can book them the day of, and they give you a much more intimate, local experience that's just perfect for a first-time visitor.
All right, so with all this in mind, the myth, the reality, the giant festival, the nightly traditions, how can you, as a visitor, actually connect with the real Guanajuato? Well, it starts by understanding a few common mistakes that a lot of people make.
To really connect with this city, there are 3 major pitfalls you want to try and avoid. Getting these right is the key to moving beyond the usual tourist traps and having a much deeper experience.
First up, just showing up for the Servantino Festival with no plan. It sounds spontaneous and fun, but the reality is just logistical chaos. Hotel prices can literally triple. A trip that might normally cost you, say, $800 can easily balloon to over $2,000. You'll end up spending more time stressing out than actually enjoying the art.
The second mistake is thinking the Callejón del Beso is Guanajuato. I get it, social media makes it look that way, but you can see the entire alley in about 5 minutes. The real soul of the city is in its museums, its incredible underground tunnels, its markets, its theaters. The alley is a symbol, the city is the story.
And finally, mistake number 3, skipping the Callejón because you don't speak Spanish. Please don't do this. If you do, you're missing out on the single best way to see the city's social fabric in action. The music, the laughter, the dancing, none of that needs translation. It's a real community tradition that you're actually invited to be a part of, not just watch from the sidelines.
And this brings us right back to the beginning. So Carmen and Luis, they may not have been real people, but you know what? That almost doesn't matter. The legend has value because the community has decided to keep it alive. The kiss on the third step, the story being told every single night on the Callejonadas, its power comes from that repetition and shared belief, not from some historical fact.
And that leaves us with this one last fascinating question. What truly makes a tradition authentic? Is it about historical accuracy? Or is it about the fact that people are still practicing it, sharing it, and finding their own meaning in it today? The story of Guanajuato seems to suggest the answer isn't in some dusty old archives, but out there, in the living, breathing streets.